Welcome to Highland League Weekly, the podcast. I'm Paul Third and I'm joined today by Callum Law as we look back on the North of Scotland Cup final, as well as a busy weekend of action from the Breedon Highland League. Our cameras were at Station Park in Nairn for the North of Scotland Cup final between Clachnacuddin and Forest Mechanics. If you'd like to watch full highlights and reaction from the game, you can check out the full episode of Highland League Weekly that's available to subscribers over on the Press and Journal website. However, if it's our chat you're looking for, then you've come to the right place. Callum, the cup final certainly lived up to its billing, with Forest coming from 2 goals down to edge out Clach in a 5-goal thriller. How did you see this one?
Well, first of all, I thought it was a wonderful final, full of sort of excitement and incident, and a great advert for sort of Highland League football, really. 2 Highland League teams in the final. I think, in terms of reflecting on it overall for Forest, it's a magnificent victory, really, especially in the circumstances, but regardless of how they did it, it was always going to be. It's the first trophy of any kind since 2012. It's the first cup competition they've won since September 2010, so just a really, really great occasion for the Cancans. On the other side for Clach, I mean, from the position they were in, it's a very painful loss for them to take. You know, they were in the final last year, which was, you know, a different experience because they were just sort of blitzed by Brora that day. It was 6-1, but to have the control they had at points in this final and to have got themselves into such a good position to not pick up the trophy was a bitter pill for the Lily Whites to swallow, and their wait for a first trophy since 2014 and a first North of Scotland Cup success since September 2001 continues.
You mentioned Clach being in control. How important was Kyle McLeod's goal just before half-time to get Forest back into this one?
Well, I think that is the sort of, you always maybe in games like this look for a turning point, and for me I think that is the big turning point in the final, because Clach, I wouldn't have necessarily said they were maybe at their absolute best in the first half, but I thought they settled better than Forest. Forest looked a wee bit nervy, and Clach sort of looked a more likely team to create in the first half. And I mean, they've, you know, Troy Cooper for their 2 goals is, you know, first one's a really sort of good finish to catch out Sean McCarthy a wee bit. In the second one, he, you know, charges down a clearance and then creates the opening when he gets the ball back and sets up James Anderson. You know, they'd done well to get their 2 goals, and they were nearly in at half time at 2-0. And although I know if it had been 2-0 at half time, Steve McDonald's team talk would have been, you know, we need to get the next goal and then it's game on, which would have been, it would have just, I think Clach would have been coming out that second half confident and the momentum still with them, but they've lost that goal to Kyle McLeod, just bang on the whistle. And then after that, they never really recovered the sort of control they maybe had at points in the first half. Like Forest, after sort of the first 10 minutes of the second half where Clach did have that Al McPhee chance especially was a good chance, but after they did a couple of chances after that, Forest just seemed to get stronger and stronger and really took the game to Clach. You know, Matt Jamieson was involved in a lot of their good work. Callum Frame, although he maybe, you know, had chances on another day, would score. He was a constant menace. You know, Kyle McLeod had a good game as well. I thought Ryan McClellan grew into it as the game went on, and Forest really, you know, took the game. And I mean, with their second goal, it's one Mark Ridgers won't want to see again. Just, I mean, he's a Clach man through and through, Mark Ridgers, and I know how much it would have meant to him. And that cross with Matt Jamieson, it's one he would usually gather, no problem, and he's just spilt it, and Ryan McRitchie's in. But I did think Conor Gethins made a decent point as well in terms of after the game. But that is, although that's happened, he felt the reaction for his players wasn't good enough after that, and I can totally understand. The other thing I think with Forest that had a sort of hand in the way they came back was the changes that Steve McDonald made at half time, and also one that was sort of forced on him. Sam Nixon had to come off with concussion just before Forest's goal, the first goal, and then at half time he took off Charlie McDonald, who maybe didn't have his best game on the right side, but right back by his own admission, and he took off Jack Grant, and he got Caden Conley on at right back and Lewis McKenzie on wide right in midfield, and sort of reshuffled things. Cohen Ramsey had come on at centre half in place of Sam Nixon, and after that I thought those changes in the right made a difference, and Forest were better, and that played a part as well.
obviously this one went the distance, the full 120 minutes with extra time required. The winner was a subject of debate, shall we say, coming from the penalty spot. Can you talk us through what happened?
Well, unfortunately in the footage as well, we don't maybe quite see it all, but the first thing with the penalty is it's very hard to say, just because of the angle, it's very hard to say conclusively, even with slowing it down, whether it hits Harry Nicholson's arm or hand or not. But it looks like it maybe does, but you couldn't necessarily say for definite. But and David Alexander, obviously the referee, gives the corner, and then the linesman Daniel Jack had a better view of it looking for side on, and he's got involved and told him to give the penalty. What I would say is the reaction of the Clach players probably suggests they got it right, because Harry Nicholson does have a sort of look of guilt on
that was the tell for me, actually,
on his face, and there's not really, I know he goes and speaks to the linesman and Josh Meakin sort of speaks to the ref as well, but there's not really any sort of great protest. And you also watch the Forest players, and when it happens they're right round the referee, they feel it was a penalty. So I think they've probably got it right in that sense. But then after that, there is a lot of sort of, I suppose the word I would use is a bit of a kerfuffle, in that I think after he's given the penalty, David Alexander, I didn't think knows maybe who's at fault, because he goes initially to red card Josh Meakins, but he's then told it's Harry Nicholson, so Harry gets a red card. And then the one which sort of put the tin lid on it was, in our camera just sort of pans around in time, but as Callum Frame takes the penalty, Harry Nicholson's still on the pitch, which folk maybe say, does that make any difference or whatever? And I don't know, but under the laws of the game, the IFAB laws of the game, after a red card, the game can't be restarted until the player that's been sent off has left the pitch. So really, in Clach were unhappy about that and saying, well, the game shouldn't have been restarted. And, you know, maybe if Callum Frame has to wait that bit longer, maybe the pressure ramps up for him. Although, as we heard from him afterwards, he felt absolutely no pressure. But that was kind of like, I think that was a situation where, I know it all happens very quickly, but I think certainly the referee could have perhaps handled that better, and, you know, the penalty shouldn't have been taken until Harry Nicholson was off the pitch. However, I do think the big call in terms of, was it a handball between the referee and the linesman, they got it right, which was the main thing. And unfortunately for Clach, for that point of view, is once they'd decided it was a handball, because the ball was going in the net, there was no alternative but to send Harry Nicholson off. But that was the pivotal moment, and I know, as Conor Gethin was speaking about, there was things that you know, he was unhappy within that, but I think the actual decision they did get correct.
Congratulations to Forest Mechanics, the North of Scotland Cup winners then. Now, there were 7 Highland League games at the weekend. We have new Breedon Highland League leaders in Formartine United after they won 2-1 at Huntly. Tyler Makita's goal had put United ahead, assisted by Huntly goalkeeper Lenny Wilson's mistake apparently, before Matthew Wallace equalised for the Black and Golds. But with 2 minutes remaining, Michael Dangana came off the bench to score against his former club and give United a 4th straight league win. United go on top with this sort of result, dare I suggest, you probably need if you want to be challengers.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's a very good win, and particularly the manner in which it's sort of come for Formartine, in terms of they didn't necessarily have things all their own way and had to work hard for it, but sometimes it's about finding a way to get a result, and that's exactly what they've done. And I think it was important as well for them because, you know, Brora didn't have a game on Saturday, so it was that chance for Formartine to go top. And I know Brora they're playing each other a week on Saturday in their next league game, which is, you know, tasty, but that'll be at North Lodge Park. And I know Brora have 2 games in hand, but I did think for Formartine it was important for them to go and try and put the points on the board on Saturday. And that's exactly what they did, and it shows the value as well of having that quality within your squad and that depth in terms of players that can come off the bench and impact the game. Because okay, last week they were already ahead at Rothes, but Michael Dangana came on last week at Rothes and scored. He's come on again on Saturday and scored. Paul Campbell, I think, set up the goal as well, and he was another sub. So it just, like, to sustain that challenge, it is it's a cliche, but it is a squad game, and Formartine with the business they've done over the summer, do have that sort of depth of quality, and it's come to the fore when they needed it on Saturday as well to get a very good 3 points. On the flip side for Huntly, it is a sore one, I think, because I think at 1-1 Huntly would have been, of course you'd like to win, but I think they would have been reasonably content with that, and I think for long spells they were very much in the game and made a good contest of it, which is maybe in contrast to the last time the sides met in the semi-final of the Evening Express Aberdeenshire Cup when Formartine run out and then comfortable 4-0 winners. It certainly wasn't the same on Saturday, but unfortunately for the Black and Golds, despite a pretty decent performance, it's they still come out in the losing side.
With Brora not in action, Brechin were another club to take advantage. They beat Wick Academy 5-1 at Glebe Park. Mitch Taylor and Ben Armour had Brechin 2 up at the break. Armour then scored as well to make it 3-0 on the hour mark. Killian Sheridan come off the bench to make it 4 before Owen Rendell pulled a goal back for Wick. However, a late penalty from Grady McGrath sealed an emphatic win for Ray McKinnon's side. Their reaction since losing to Fraserburgh has been very strong.
They've won their last 2 games and they're nicely in the mix as well, point behind Formartine. And I mean, they did their job pretty convincingly on Saturday, and they were without sort of Ewan Spark and Adam Hutchison, who would be their established sort of centre half pairing, but they coped fine. And I was speaking about depth of Formartine, Brechin seem to have that now as well, and that they were able to bring Mitchell Findlay, Killian Sheridan and Grady McGrath off the bench, which is 3 very good attacking players to have to come on. And you've seen Ben Armour, who sort of injury hampered him at the start of the season, but that's 3 goals in 2 games now, and he's sort of starting to be motoring. And it's overall, I know Ray McKinnon felt the things maybe could have done better, but it's a pretty strong performance and an emphatic result for Brechin. Wick on the other side of it, they're travelled down with 11 players and without 11 players, and they were very much down to the bare bones. They had Simon Rabilas in goal. He was on loan, on an emergency loan from Inverness County Thistle, and I noticed as well Richard McCaddy, who retired at the end of last season, getting the call to come back and play as well. So the scories were short, and Glebe Park's probably not a place you really want to be going when they're short, but I think scoring their goal and some of the chances they created, Gary Manson took some positives out of the game, but really I think they'll just be quite happy to take that on the chin and move on. And they've got what looks, hope on paper anyway, an intriguing and pretty winnable home Scottish Cup tie against Benburb this weekend coming, so they'll look forward to that now.
At Fraserburgh, it ended 2-2 between the Broch and Buckie Thistle. Darryl McCarty's early penalty had put the Jags ahead, but the Broch looked to have turned it round before half-time with goals from Fraser Stewart and Scott Barber. However, a long-range effort from Buckie's substitute Aaron Cummins secured a point for the visitors. However, neither manager seemed particularly happy with the outcome of this one.
No, neither manager was sort of really crowing, shall we say, about getting a point. I think it sort of felt like a result that neither team really wanted. I mean, Lewis McKinnon, I think, felt Buckie with being in front with the penalty and playing down the slope in the first half and things, got themselves into a good position, and then I think that he felt they lost 2 pretty sloppy goals before half time. The first one there was some good playing there, but the second one, Fraserburgh's second goal from a Buckie point of view, Sam Morrison will know he should do better up against Scott Barber there. And then it's turned round and the Broch's 2-1 up, and they had the advantage of playing down the slope second half, and I think Mark Cowie was looking for and expecting them to really push on and sort of get that next goal and go away and sort of win the game really, and it didn't quite happen, and Aaron Cummins has scored a good goal to get a point for Buckie. I think in fairness to the Fraserburgh players, they did have plenty of pressure towards the end in their sort of usual late flurry, but they couldn't sort of find a way past the Theo Simpson in goal or the Buckie defence. And just what I was saying about it, feels like not a great point for either. Like for Fraserburgh, in that sort of mix at the top of the table, it's just sort of, after losing last week against Bankside, it's a wee bit of ground lost again, unlike Formartine and Brechin and that. And Ken, whereas if they could have won, that would have been that extra couple of points would have been kept him right in there, would have been valuable. And for Buckie, they're sort of speaking about top 6 being their target, and again, a point's okay, but it doesn't really pull you that bit closer in the way that a win would have done. So I can understand with both with outcome and the way the sort of game transpired why neither side was, overjoyed with a point, let's say.
At Spain Park, it finished Bankside 1, Inverurie Locos 0. Max Alexander, in the right place. 8 minutes from time to get the only goal of the game for D as they move up to 5th. They'll be pleased to be headed into the Scottish Cup tie against the Broch this weekend on the back of another good win.
They're on a great run at the moment, Bankside. 9 games unbeaten in all competitions, and they've got, it's that old word that we use a lot, but they've got great momentum at the minute. And it was a good result to get again in terms of, I don't think they were maybe necessarily at their best, but again, a player coming off the bench making the difference. Max Alexander, he did it last week in the league game against Fraserburgh. He created a couple of goals. He scored a winner on Saturday, and although he's maybe not always maybe a starter now for Bankside, just with his experience and his quality in the sort of top end of the pitch, he's a very good player to have to put on, and he's made a real difference on Saturday. I think for Locos, it's that thing. It feels the case again, almost of a hard luck story, and that they've played, I think, first half especially, I think they played quite well, but nae taking advantage in the attacking third and, making their good play count, and that sort of has been the theme for most of the season so far for Inverurie, and they're still trying to get it right up top. And I would say on a different note as well, we wish Ethan Cairns and Inverurie all the best as well, because I believe he's suffered quite a sort of nasty gash in his head or face after a collision with Jevon Anderson in the first half, and I think there's a few folk connected with Locos as well maybe felt Jevon Anderson could have been, although it was accidental, could have been sent off potentially as well, because it was, what I've heard the word reckless used with regards to that incident. But Ethan's okay, but he's just requiring a bit of treatment still, I think, so hopefully he comes back in due course.
There was a big game with ramifications at the bottom of the table. It finished Lossiemouth 2, Rothes 0. Lossie leapfrog Keith into 16th and have increased their lead on the bottom club thanks to this result. Owen Loveland and Liam Harvey getting the goals in this one, and what's another big win for Steve Porter's side, who seem to be on the move.
Lossie, that's now 7 points out of their last 9 in the league, which is, a nice wee run of form to put together, and they'll be looking to try and extend that as long as they can. And it felt like it's a very good result for Lossie, and they'll be happy with the clean sheet again as well. It's 2 clean sheets out of those last 3 league games as well. But it felt, given that there were 6 points between the sides at kick-off, it felt like for Rothes it was a game they needed to win to stop being sort of cut adrift, and they haven't managed to do that, and they're now 9 points behind Lossie, 8 points behind Keith, and although there's still 20 games to go, it's a lot of points to try and claw back, and at the moment, unfortunately, with the way it's going for Rothes, it is hard to see where that win that could maybe kick-start things is coming from. They've been close in a couple of games where they've been leading and things and haven't managed to get over the line, but now I do worry for them, and it's like they've sort of, where they've been better, the better part of their team or their play this season so far has been the attacking threat, but Ronnie Sharp said on Saturday didn't think they did enough attacking wise, and then the other issue is that they're still too easy to score against, and they haven't quite maybe done enough in the final third, and then Lossie have been able to come up with a couple of goals which, from a Rothes point of view, you'd be disappointed with. They're pretty basic, and you've been beat 2-0 and now they're even further adrift, so a concerning sort of period for Rothes at the moment, but take nothing away from Lossie. They've done their job well, and they're in a good place at the minute, the Coasters.
Our next game's from Seafield Park. It was a 7-goal thriller, so bear with us. It finished Strathspey Thistle 3, Nairn County 4. This is a roller coaster of a game, to put it mildly. Nairn took the lead through Paul Brindle, only for Strathspey to hit back with 3 goals through Josh Race, Philip Fransack and Sean Morrison. The Granton Jags then felt that Nairn should have been reduced to 10 men before the break, following county captain Fraser Dingwall's challenge on George Robertson. But referee Scott Leslie opted only for a yellow. That decision then came into play in the second half, with Dingwall scoring to reduce the arrears on the hour mark before Ben Barron came off the bench to equalise for County. Barron then set up Brindle to complete the comeback, but of course there's always a late sting. Brindle was then sent off for kicking the ball away, his second bookable offence. It was all happening in this one.
It certainly was. I mean, for Nairn, first of all, I mean, Wayne McIntosh, I think, was, well, first half especially, but even up to the hour mark, was unhappy with what he was watching, felt they were nowhere near their best, lacked a bit of intensity and desire and things. But then they've got 2 quick goals in quick succession. Fraser Dingwall's one, Ben Barron's one, and they've come right back into it and come back and won, which to show that character when they're maybe not at their best and had a sort of poor first half performance. That's very pleasing from a Nairn point of view, and I think that's something that giving away was themselves a player as well. Wayne sort of looking to instill that sort of never say die attitude, and although I know they were disappointed to lose last week, I think that's 6 wins and 7 for Nairn, which is very good, and they're sitting 7th in the league and going along nicely. For Strathspey, I mean, I'll come to what Ryan Essen was sort of saying about decisions and things, but in terms of how the game played out, he felt they were too open defensively and they needed to have more control of the game when they were 3-1 up. Like, 3-1 up at half time was a good position, and they sort of let, I mean, Nairn played well but in that second half, but also he felt Strathspey sort of let Nairn back into it. The decision sort of shortly before half time is quite a big call, and I have seen footage of the challenge, and it is a sort of quite a heavy challenge, and he doesn't, Fraser Dingwall doesn't get the ball, he just catches George Robertson, and I can understand why Strathspey felt it was a red card. It's one of them in the game now you do see them given. I know as well Nairn felt they could have had a penalty in the second half, a sort of tangle with Zach McPhee and Andrew Gregg, which again was another one on another day it could have been given. So I think there was, on both sides, there was a bit of sort of disappointment maybe with those decisions, and Paul Brindle sending off was quite ironic really. I shouldn't have laughed, but he got his first booking, I'm told, was because he asked the ref, Scott Leslie, why a Strathspey player hadn't been booked for kicking the ball away. So that was his first booking, and then in the dying embers Brindle's kicked the ball away to waste it, deliberately to waste time, and on this occasion he's been booked and sent off. So that sort of rounded off what was if you'd gone to that game, a tremendous game of football, but I mean, one of them, great result for Nairn, but Strathspey are left wondering how they've not come out with something from it, because I should add as well, they also had, nearly missed it, but the Granton Jags also had 2 gilt-edged chances at 3. Once it was 3-3, Jamie Calder and Matthew Wright, who will both probably feel they should have scored. And if it's that thing, if you didn't capitalise in those moments, you'll get stung, and that's what happened.
Our final game, not much to report unfortunately. Keith 0, Turriff United 0. The Maroons will be left disappointed by this one, I imagine, after failing to capitalise on United goalkeeper Lee Herbert's dismissal on the hour mark following a tussle with Liam Duncan, who was also booked for his part, as the teams played out a goalless draw. Clearly lots of effort, but little in the way of goal-mouth chances we hear.
Aye, from what I've heard about this game, that seems to be the case. I think maybe over the piece, Keith perhaps did threaten slightly more, and I think maybe as well that last half hour when they're against 10, you would expect them to have the bulk of the pressure. Unfortunately for them, they just haven't been able to find a way through. And, Craig Ewan's been saying for a while they need to sort of find a way to score more goals, and Saturday's game is sort of evidence of why the Keith are saying that and Craig Ewan's saying that, because that's one where if with the way the game's panned out, they'll be disappointed not to take all 3 points. However, it's maybe not the worst point as well. It's 2 teams that are usually pretty evenly matched, and that's how it's panned out. I think Turriff, if you'd offered them a point before the game, would they have taken it? Maybe not, but with the way the game's gone, away from home, playing with 10 men, there's worse outcomes certainly, so that's, they'll just move on and try and get back to winning ways next week in what looks a decent Scottish Cup tie as well, up at Nairn against Turriff.
Let's have a look at how those results affect the latest Breedon Highland League standings. That's it for this week's episode of Highland League Weekly, the podcast. Thanks to Callum for joining me. A reminder, if you want to watch the full highlights from the North of Scotland Cup final, you can do so on the full Highland League Weekly episode. That's available to subscribers over on the Press and Journal website. In the meantime, if you'd like to keep up to date with all the latest news in the Breedon Highland League from the Press and Journal, you can do so on social media. You can find us on X, or you can sign up to the Highland League Weekly fans group on Facebook. We'll be back next week with more chat, but until then, enjoy the football wherever you're watching this week.